So we are considering this question of how do we take care of people who are taking care of others? And how can we build systems and organizations that support folks who are giving support? And again, the core of that idea is if we can support the folks who are the most vulnerable, it's going to work for everybody. As a quick reminder, when we're thinking about pay equity, the kind of lowest level definition of it is that pay equity is compensating worker roles without discrimination. So the literal definition is balance, right? That it's even, it's the same. I will say though that when we talk about pay equity, other things often come up, like paying people righteously or paying them well, paying them fairly. And our first town hall was about that idea of like moving from beyond a minimum wage or a living wage to an idea of a thriving wage, or what does it mean to thrive? What does it look like to thrive? And how can we build organizations and systems that promote thriving? We also talked about pay transparency at an earlier town hall. Pay transparency being the practice of sharing openly and explicitly information around compensation and or benefits. Just a kind of ongoing practice of communication. And if you're curious about those town halls, we do have the notes and sharebacks and stuff on the website that was just dropped into the chat. But tonight we're focusing on caring for people who are caring for people. So we're going to use that chat again. And in the chat, I'm going to invite you to drop a quick answer to this question, which is, how have you been a caregiver in your own life? How have you been a caregiver in your own life? Like, how do you think about that for yourself? However you think about that, and just listen to the question, how do you mean how we care for ourselves or when we have been in a caregiving role? However you think about it, maybe both. All right, so as these answers from the group are coming in, I invite you just to scan them and notice, right? What do you notice? Like, I'm noticing there's some of these that are very kind of role specific, right? Some folks who seems like their ideas have changed over time. Folks that feel like this kind of, it's never just one type of care, right? This idea, it's can be a very broad brush in many ways, or it can be very specific. Wonderful. Yeah, cats, friends, people we're in relationship with, right? Writ large. Wonderful. Okay, so we're gonna invite our 3 guests to do a little sharing. And when we were doing our prep for this, as a group, we came up with these kind of 5 questions that we asked each of them to speak to. So I'm gonna drop these questions in the chat just because I think they're really interesting. So these are the 5 questions. Oop, that's a big mess of a blob of text. So the first is, as a caregiver, what are things that make you feel invisible or unseen? How did you prepare? Or did it prepare you? What have you learned, either philosophically or pro tips, kind of cultural norms or unwritten rules that you've experienced? And then this was the one that came up for us a lot, was the idea of like, oh, I do this and then I feel guilty, right? Do this thing for myself, and as a caretaker, I feel guilty. So that's the last one that we're asking folks to speak to. They're going to be pretty succinct, right? But we're going to hear about each of those 5 questions from our 3 people. So Sadaf, would you do your little intro about yourself again and then answer those questions for us?
Yeah, for sure. So Sadaf, she, her, hers, and I am a caregiver off and on for my dad since 2014. And for the first question, what are the things that make you feel invisible and unseen? And I think for me, there is like the type of labor itself, but then also the kind of mental, like existential, like I have an hour at the end of the day. Do I take care of myself? Do I do my writing? Do I start the laundry? Do I do my work for the next day? So there's always these negotiations that are happening internally that are never seen. And then for the second one, how did you prepare? Did it prepare you? So during our prep, I wasn't prepared at all, but then just thinking, we were talking just now, and it's like, I think like the people who are caregivers now, maybe they have like their childhood, they were always like the peacemaker, the diplomat. And so you really do have this foundation of preparation, but then the situation itself, like I'd never like cooked anything before, cleaned anything before, or like had to do like injections or things like this. And so you do have to learn a lot as you go. And then in terms of what have you learned, there's a lot, but I think the most important thing that I've learned is that, you know, recently it's like instead of thinking about self-esteem, thinking about self-compassion. So if you're always trying to like work on your self-esteem, when you're caregiving, you're never going to get the external praise or the external things that you need. So you really have to like teach yourself to be compassionate towards yourself and, you know, just talk to yourself the way that you would talk to your best friend. And that's really what's gotten me through like really hard times. And then in terms of the cultural norms and unwritten rules, so my parents are from Iran. And I think in that culture, daughters just have to do a lot. But then there's like all these books on like parenting, but there's really no books on how to be a good daughter or daughtering or daughterhood. And so, yeah, I always feel like I'm not being good enough, but then, you know, you still do what you do. So it's one of those. And then why do you feel guilty? And what are some tension points for you in this role? So I think it's funny because this has changed a lot. Like when I was first caregiving, you know, I was in my early 20s and very bratty. And now I'm like in my 30s and I'm still a little bratty. But I think what's interesting now is like I'm saying the things to my dad that he would say to me as a kid. And so it's just like absolutely insane. Like, I'm like, why aren't you listening to me? And then it's like, how many times have I heard that from my dad? Why aren't you listening to me? So it's like, it's tense, but now that I'm talking about it with you all, it's kind of funny at the same time. And that's my spiel.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I love I don't know how much of the faces you could see, but there was a lot of like nodding and reflection. I think people felt reflected in what you just shared. So thank you, Sabah.
Oh, I just stare at this light thing. I'm too afraid to look at faces on Zoom, but thank you.
Understandably. All right. Whitney, would you speak to those questions for us, please?
Hi, yes. Yeah, my once again, my name is Whitney Hill, pronouns she, her, hers. And so I kind of define myself as a second generation caregiver and training. So for that first question, as a caregiver, what are the things that make you feel invisible, unseen? So I myself have non-apparent disabilities that deal mainly with mental health. And so it's been, I feel like a lot of self-reflection and personal training of how to find, I guess, peaceful compromises between maybe my trigger points in terms of like communication and working with different family members As I kind of mentioned at the beginning, Alzheimer's kind of runs rampant on both sides of my family. And currently I have two grandmothers who are in pretty advanced Alzheimer's stages, as well as an aunt who is fairly young. And so there's been a lot of heavy observation from both of my parents as they deal with that process of not only a child looking after their parents in that way, and then keeping for me in the back of my mind that for my brother and I, who knows what's in our future, but that might be the same spot we might be in, in X number of years. And so kind of picking up those cues of like, how did our parents, how did our aunts and our uncles, we have pretty big extended family, how did they go through that process of still being the child and still kind of keeping that identity, but then also keeping an identity of a caregiver, which, as most of us know, can be really difficult sometimes because it's incredibly demanding. And so how did I prepare? Like I said, I for the past maybe about 15 years, ever since my grandfather passed from Alzheimer's in 2007, has that been 15 years? I can't keep track of years, but there's been that kind of started a rabbit hole for both sides of my family in terms of like health and education and just kind of internal research and just different ways that we take account for our own health. So I think the biggest thing has just been observing my my aunts and uncles and close family and working with them and talking with them about what they're doing to get through the process, since dealing with a parent, if you're the child, it's can emotionally and mentally kind of feel different than if if you're someone maybe a little bit more on the outside. And so what have I learned? I would say always talk to your family, keep those notes. I know that in the Black community, and this kind of goes into the second question about cultural norms in the Black community, there's really, at least for my family, has not been a lot of note trails about health, about mental health, about that branching a family tree of like who has what. And there's been a lot of commonalities we've seen outside of Alzheimer's, by way of depression and diabetes and other things, that we don't really know of because we don't talk about it internally. So so the biggest thing would be, that keeping notes of medical and health conditions and making sure that you're aware of those health conditions going on in your family, because that can really impact how you take care of people down the line. And then the last one, why do you feel guilty, or what are some tension points for you in this role? So I think having to see the first line of caregivers, the first line of defense, it feels like my mom, my dad, my aunts, my uncles, going through their journey with my grandparents and their brothers and sisters that are going handling with Alzheimer's. There is a bit of a guilt that I can't take their pain away. I think that's just the biggest thing. I can't take their pain away. And as much as I try to conceptualize, what it must feel like, and as much as I break down and what my role is as a granddaughter, or, seeing my aunt, going through this, it's not the same, because, in the same, that's how I always feel about it, because this is their sibling, this is their mom and dad. And so that's where I just get really internal, and it just really messes me up that I can't take their pain away. I would do anything in the world to give just relief. So those are my questions. Thank you for thank you for asking.
Thank you so much, Whitney. Yeah, and that makes me think about those things that we wish we could do, but that are completely out of our control, right? As opposed to the things that are in our control. Like, what can we do to alleviate suffering? If we can't just take it all away, what can we do to alleviate it? All right, Dana Cruz, would you, hello, CP Chang. We did ask for partners, children, pets, etc., to wave if they were in the frame. So good job. Dana Cruz, tell us your thoughts.
Yes. Hi, Dana Cruz, she, her, hers. Again, I'm a mother of 4, and then I am a wellness professional. I have, and also I'm a artist and former performer, which just informs some of my experience. I don't want to go off on a tangent, but artist as caregiver is a tricky one for me, but definitely informs what it felt like to be trying to work in that industry as a parent. There's a lot of feeling there. So what are the things that make me feel invisible? Trying to be a whole person in all aspects of my life. So trying to be true and authentic, because a lot of times people they don't want to hear that your kids are sick and you're canceling their appointment, or that you're sick and you're canceling their appointment. But sometimes those are the things that have to happen. So letting people down, lack of social support. So feeling like there is this idea, especially in the workforce, of like, what happens with your family happens outside of this time. I don't want to know about it. I don't want to hear about it. When you're here, you're supposed to be here. And when you're there, you're there. And I have a really hard time sort of navigating that. And making connection, right? Knowing when I want to say, what I really want to be doing right now is leaving early so that I can make this concert. But feeling like that might negatively impact me, or negatively impact the way that I'm viewed. Like I'm not viewed as taking my job seriously enough, or things like that. Lack of financial and institutional support and stability. So feeling like when I ended up pregnant unexpectedly with my 4th child, there was no maternity leave for me, because I work for myself. So I had to work twice as hard to pay my bills, and prepare to take off time. And then it was that dance of, well, my body's not really ready to go back, but I got to be back. So we're just going to have to make that call. But, and especially after the pandemic, a lot more sort of anger surfaced around having to make those choices, and feeling like that I do contribute a lot to society, and my kids contribute to society. And so there should be some kind of a support there for when those things happen. And then societal expectations, self-expectations, self-identification. We'll get it. That goes to more of the other questions. How did I prepare? I don't think I did. I don't think I did anything special. I kind of did some stuff, or I knew a lot of stuff around birth, but the parenting piece was sort of like winging it, just kind of figuring it out as we went along. Did it prepare? Oh, and then I took notes earlier, because I'm trying to also be conscious of being succinct. That's why I keep glancing over. The only other preparation would be being a teacher or a sister or a friend or a daughter, but that did not prepare me, is what I wrote. It did not prepare me. What have I learned? That for me, it's essential to have space that is outside of my home in order to explore and have adventure for myself. I cannot do it in my own house. I don't know if that's everybody or if that's just me, but I need different walls. I need different space. I need to know that if I'm doing a certain practice, that my children are not going to come in and, shake it up and change things. So that was not something I knew going in. I thought, oh, well, I'd be able to just do yoga for 20 minutes in the basement. It'll be fine. No, I have to actually be away in order to really feel like I get something out of that time. That my self-care is not indulgent, it's essential. That taking care of myself actually does take care of others. And this is a very practical one, because I have, I feel like in the times it's hard to take care of myself, I say, well, what would you tell your child to do in this moment? And if you don't do it, they'll never do it. They'll never know how to do it. You can tell them, oh, you should do this or you should do that. But if they don't actually see you doing it, they won't do it. And then I was really shocked. A lot of my clients, I recently just took a retreat, and I was feeling sort of guilty about going on retreat for a week. And I had so many clients that were texting me while I was gone saying, like, we are so with you in this, because I wish I could be taking a retreat. And I see you doing it. It makes me feel like maybe I could do it. Like, I didn't think that I could, but maybe the world's not going to fall apart if I leave. And so it does feel like that's sort of like something I'm doing for everybody, that it's not just my own thing, it's also doing it for the whole community of people I come into contact with. I've learned that I need therapy and meditation regularly, that I need physical practice regularly, and I need to nurture my body. I need a community of like-minded folks who allow me to speak my truth. That is not in my case, my family. And I've lost, a number of friends along the way who are not as, it changes you. It changes the things that caregiving, changes you and changes the things that you find important and the things that you need. And being able to just speak those truths to a group of people who say yes, as opposed to, well, don't say that. Like that's sad. Smile, like it's okay. You're great. You have, everything's great. Was not helpful for me. I need to be out in nature. I need to have silence. I need to have boundaries, and I need lists and timers. I need to really do that for myself. Cultural norms, unwritten rules, that you're a disappointment, no matter what you do. You're a disappointment as a woman or a mother or a friend or a colleague or a business owner. Somewhere you're not hitting the line, that somebody else has it all figured out and is nailing it every day, all the time. That accepting help means being weak. That admitting that you're overwhelmed is also being weak. That mommy wine time is self-care. That the unseen mental load is a reality, and that success is measured in finances. And when do I feel guilty? I feel guilty taking time away from family. I feel guilty taking time away from clients. I feel guilty not accepting more business or saying yes to every single opportunity, or being more ambitious and wanting to have more and be bigger. I feel guilty not missing I feel guilty missing special events because of work. I feel guilty about not traveling to see family or being a better daughter. Yeah, that's what I got.
Woo! So many things, right? I'm just thinking about the norms that folks have encountered, and that kind of prismatic experience of caregiving, right? That maybe we all have experienced, that oh, you're not enough thing, no matter kind of how we walk through the world, but that additional layer of also having focus on other people, whoever those people are, can kind of magnify that. I'm thinking about.